Good morning to all of you. Well, first of all, let me extend my warm welcome to all of you who have come to this Urban Age conference hosted by the London School of Economics Cities Program and the University of Hong Kong. It really gives me great pleasure to be able to speak to you this morning. Unfortunately, I'm not able to stay for the debate. I understand that the Urban Age conference essence lies in the debate and the exchange of views or a bit of argument, but because I need to go back for a very important meeting with all my other principal officials, and indeed I'm flying out in the afternoon to Shanghai, to another wonderful city. So program is a bit tight, but I hope that LSE cities will bring this conference back to Hong Kong in future. Where is my remote? Is this the remote? Okay. As John said, I was given this topic to talk about responding to global challenges. I have to say that I'm not entirely sure that I can really give you a very credible presentation based on my limited experience. But what I will do in the next 20 or so minutes, and perhaps we have a bit of time for a few Q&As, is to share with you Hong Kong's experience and Hong Kong's experiment, especially in the last 4.5 years in my position as Hong Kong's Secretary for Development. I have this privilege of taking forward this piece of work, which is very close to the Urban Age program, which is the physical and the social, because I'm sure John knows about it. I was Hong Kong's Director of Social Welfare for 3 years in a very difficult period, 2000-2003, when we were still suffering from the Asian financial crisis and the SARS epidemic. So I think I understand how important it is to take care of the social, human aspects in any form of city planning. Now, first of all, I have picked this up from the LSE's booklet, which talk about this whole venture. The LSE cities investigates how complex urban systems are responding to the pressures of growth, change, and globalization with new infrastructures of design and governance that both complement and threaten social and environmental equity. Those are a lot of words there, and each word is very significant. And I think Hong Kong stands up very well in terms of that complexity, the complex urban system where a lot of things are interacting and happening. I will not have the time as well as the insight to talk about governance today, though I would say that governance is becoming more and more important to make sure that whatever we have in mind is able to be delivered. Now, just a bit of background, especially for those coming from overseas, when I mentioned this complex urban systems in Hong Kong, which we have to manage and respond to all those pressures and changes over the years. First is, of course, population growth. Hong Kong's population increased by 1 million per decade since the 1950s. But into the year 2000, our projections are such that this sort of population growth will somewhat moderate. And we want to take advantage of this sort of lessened population growth pressure to be able to do other things in order to respond to the global challenge. Because the pressure of population growth is such that many cities do not have many options in hand, because you need to deal with very livelihood issues as a result of the population growth. Now, what is Hong Kong today? We are a very modern and dense city of 7 million people. From these few indices that I have picked, you'll see that, I hope you will agree that this is a very successful city economically. We now predominantly service economy. GDP per capita is good. And with a small place like this, without much natural resources, we are now the world's #1 in terms of our aviation business, cargo business. Although the container business has come down a bit, we are still #3 in the world. Since this is a gathering of city planners, sociologists, and urban people, the first thing we need to know about Hong Kong is how how we have responded to that population growth, that economic needs in terms of land utilization. This chart has now been used umpteen times in my presentation, but for those who are first comers to Hong Kong, you'll still be amazed by the fact that of the 1,100 square kilometers of land that we have only actually developed less than 1/4. So the built-up area accounted for only 23.7%. And the rest are really preserved country parks, accounting for about 46%, and wetlands and some agricultural land and so on. And what is more interesting is if you look in detail into the 23% and try to break it down, all sorts of housing, public, private, HOS, village housing, take up only 7% of the land. So 7 million people crammed into 7% of the land is quite remarkable in terms of intensity. And the city is still working and moving with that sort of intensity. How have we been able to cope with vertical densities? We have chosen to go high in order to meet that sort of population needs. So vertical densities, I think, have been meeting Hong Kong's needs over the last few decades, to the extent that the number of skyscrapers now have surpassed New York City. That's why on one occasion with some New Yorkers, I was joking that if there's going to be a skyscraper museum, and there's indeed one in New York City, it should be relocated to Hong Kong. Just to show you some wonderful pictures about the countryside, which has been preserved as a result of that model of land use adopted in Hong Kong. Nowadays, 46% of our land are country parks, protected by law. So it's not just an administrative measure, it's protected by law together with the special areas. They are put under statutory control, and any attempt to take any small piece of land from the country parks will meet with very strong opposition. We have already seen this yesterday. If you switch on the TV news yesterday, you will have this scene of people putting up banners and objecting to the town planning board's discussion on trying to take a very small piece. What is it, Jimmy? 5%. 5 hectares. 5 hectares of land from a country park in order to expand a landfill to look after Hong Kong's municipal waste problem. And that has met with strong opposition. The Town Planning Board has yet to deal with it later this month. So this is the sort of difficulties that we are facing in terms of land use. It's all very well to preserve a land, but once preserved, you have little hope to try to take them away. Now, apart from going up, of course, any city needs other measures to support that sort of intensity and still keep the city moving and generally a livable city. So I just want to talk about transport. Although transport does not fall within my policy portfolio, we have another secretary called the Secretary for Transport and Housing. But the control over cars, over automobiles in Hong Kong is the envy of many places. So we managed to control cars in Hong Kong, of course, by investing very heavily in the public transport system, especially mass transit. So these two indicators compare for you the length of public roads that we have built per 1,000 population in Hong Kong as compared with other cities of equal economic affluence, and also the private car ownership in Hong Kong. So you see the green bars, they are significantly lower than most of the cities, including Singapore, which have a similar size, in fact, smaller than ourselves and so on. And at the moment, some 90% of the average daily trips by Hong Kong people are looked after by public transport. So it is very common that most people do not feel that they need a car in Hong Kong to get around. It is also achieved by good connectivity, especially in some districts like the Central. Many people like Central because it's very walkable. All the main buildings are being connected through the pedestrian network. And also we have the escalator which brings people up to the mid-levels. So again, it saves the need for car trips. The way that we plan our buildings also provide a lot of convenience, what we call all the amenities under one roof. So in zoning terms, we have what we call the CDA, the Comprehensive Development Area Zoning, which allows for residential, commercial, and other things to go into the same plot of land. And of course, this is one of the latest in the above the Kowloon Station on the Airport Railway, with the elements, with the car parks, cinemas, and everything put together. And in the more intangible terms, Hong Kong has always been branded as a place where the East meets the West. So the cultural diversity is something that makes the city quite attractive. So far so good. This is Hong Kong's unique cityscape. But this Hong Kong experience may not be totally pleasant. So in the next few slides, I'm going to show you some of the problems that have caught people's attention and have aroused quite considerable public concern, particularly in recent years. First is this concern and complaint about segregated neighborhoods, very boring and monopolistic shopping centers, and of course, as years pass by, urban decay. Okay. One of the pictures you see here with the title called Town of Sadness Pleads for Help refers to a new town in the northwestern part of New Territories called Tin Shui Wai, which has been branded as a city of sadness because there was a high concentration of public rental housing, a high concentration of low-income households, and a lack of jobs. In the northern part of this new town, the public housing component is as high as close to 90%. And this is, I think, one of the main problems which lead to segregated neighborhoods. And you have seen elements with this all wonderful convenience all under one roof, but the outcome will be this sort of wall-like buildings, which I put it under the overwhelming power of economic pressure. I'm not shirking responsibility. The government has some responsibility to it because those are airport rail sites, and also the government manages to collect handsome premium from this sort of high-density developments. We do not like to see some of the high buildings out of context. These are only two examples. So because of the economic pressure, sometimes the planning control is not able to catch up with the actual situation. And we're also seeing urban heat island. You can see on this urban climatic map, the urban areas are several degrees higher than the countryside in Hong Kong. Environmental degradation in terms of growing carbon emissions, which have increased by 20% in the last 10 years. And I would draw your attention to this analysis. Power generation accounts for 67% of Hong Kong's greenhouse gas emissions, and buildings account for some 90% of the electricity consumption in Hong Kong. So it means that buildings alone, we have about 42,000 buildings in Hong Kong, they account for 60% of the greenhouse gas emissions, which of course any person with common sense will agree with me, then you should tackle buildings if you want to do something about the greenhouse gas emissions, which there will be an example I'll show you later on. On the roadside, the situation is not good as well. These are the roadside pollution indexes captured by the Environmental Protection Department. Very often, on most of the days in the congested areas in Central Causeway Bay, you are seeing this high or very high indexes. These are the social aspects of the city development, social disintegration. We have done quite a number of urban redevelopment projects with a very good objective in mind. We want to help people to take them out of very dilapidated living conditions in the old buildings, sometimes without lifts, without the hygiene facilities. But there are people who felt that by doing that, perhaps not have done it in a proper way, we might have unintentionally undermined the neighborhood, the social network built up over years in a particular area. So these are some of the protests actions that we have seen in recent years. And the increasing disparity between the rich and poor, as measured by the Gini coefficient. So much for the experience of Hong Kong, the good side, the not so pleasant side of our development. At the beginning of this term, the chief executive has said in his policy address, in fact, to follow up on his election manifesto, where he said that we should go for more balanced development, because back in 2006, 2007, it was the time when we were seeing all these protests, whether on the heritage conservation side or on the city development side. So the chief executive has given this mandate for his team to take through. He wants us to press ahead with what he called progressive development, which means that overall progress rather than economic development is more important. So it's not just chasing after GDP growth or affluence. Apart from the economic benefits, he said that we should strive for benefits to culture, the society and environment, which means that we have to go for sustainable, balanced, and diversified development. So with that sort of backdrop, in the last 4.5 years, I'm trying to put it in practice. I'm a very pragmatic official, so I want to practice what progressive development means and how we are going to reflect it in our policies. This little table or grid, whichever way you call it, is drawn up for the first time. So David Leung, you came for this. Professor Leung is a very good friend. We work very closely, and he must have gone to umpteen of my presentations in the last few years. But every time he still came and wants something new. So I gave you this slide. This is a new slide you have not seen. This is trying to capture in a more systematic way the things that I've been doing or experimenting in the last 4.5 years. My portfolio, broadly speaking, cover planning, building, land, and heritage. Infrastructure is relatively straightforward. I actually put very little attention to the infrastructure, partly because of my own social background and partly because I have every trust in my engineers. They will be able to deliver the infrastructure program with my little support. So in each of this area, there are 3 guiding principles to the work I do and to the practices or the policies that I try to test out. They are sustainability, livability, and humanity. Okay. So I try to slot in the things that I have done over these 4.5 years into these boxes. And I can take you through each one of those, but we don't have a time. So I have highlighted 4 areas, 4 boxes, which I'll briefly explain to you how the elements have been reflected in the policy. So in terms of building sustainability, I'm going to show you the initiatives and the policy we have rolled out to improve the quality built environment in Hong Kong.